Hey guys, what's up? Mr. Brotherton here, and we're going to be talking about system interaction. So this is the Concept 1 notes for Unit 3, and Unit 3 is all about body systems and homeostasis. So what is a system? A system is basically a set of interacting things that kind of get together and form some kind of whole, right? So a system can be something that has inputs, and then those inputs can kind of get processed, and then that processing can make some outputs. So in this case, the systems we're going to be talking about are the biological systems at the different levels in that hierarchy we talked about at the beginning of the year. To really understand systems, though, one of the things biologists use are models. So I have a couple different models here that help us understand different systems. And one of those models you're probably pretty familiar with, that's something like this, is a physical model. Okay, another thing that we've kind of talked about in this class can be mathematical models. Another thing like this right here is a computer simulation. So that's another type of model. And then finally we come to this last one, and that's a conceptual model. So it's how we kind of can think about an idea, right? So in this case, this is how protein synthesis works, or what's known as the central dogma in genetics, and that's that DNA turns into RNA, and then that RNA gets read and makes proteins, right? So this unit is really a lot about conceptual models. Okay, so what's life again? Let's review. Biology is the study of life. All living things are made of cells. They respond to stimuli. They're able to grow and reproduce. They have energy. They have a metabolism. Remember, that's the sum of all the biochemical processes. They contain DNA and RNA as their genetic material, and they adapt to their environment. So far in this class, we've talked about adaptations. We've talked about how organisms respond. So now we're going to start zooming into the organism and talking about, well, what are cells? How do things respond to stimuli at a cellular level? How do things actually grow? What does that look like? And in the next unit, we'll really start getting into metabolism. Okay, so now that we're starting to zoom in, I just want to remind you of our levels of organization. So I like to divide these from the organism up and then from the organism down. So the big levels of organization are the organism itself, so like you and me, or in this case a crocodile, a population, remember that's a bunch of organisms in the same species, a community, that's organisms of different species living in the same place. Ecosystem is those communities plus the abiotic and other biotic factors that are there. A biome is a geographical or global distribution of similar ecosystems. And then ultimately we get to the biosphere, which is basically where all life is on Earth. So that's what we've been talking about. Now we're going to get into the smaller things, which is the small levels of organization. So we'll do these from the bottom up. And so that's going to be subatomic particles, then atoms, then elements, then molecules, then macromolecules, which we'll get into in the next unit. Now we get to a cell. So a cell is the first place where life could exist. Remember, some life is only single-celled. Cells can get together to make tissues. Tissues can make organs. Organs can make organ systems. And organ systems can make up a complicated organism like you or me or this lion here. So this is where we're going in this unit, is from the organism to the cell level. So let's talk about it. Organization of organisms, this is what it looks like. We're highly organized. We could call this the hierarchy of life. So an organism is made of organ systems. An organ system is going to be composed of organs, so a stomach. Each organ is made of tissues, so like muscular tissue that makes up an organ. Each tissue is going to be made up of cells, so like smooth muscle cells in this case. So you can see here is a human being. They are an organism. They're made of the organ system, so that's the digestive system here. That's made of organs like a stomach. A stomach is going to be made up of tissues like muscle tissue, and that muscle tissue is going to be made up of a specific type of cells, in this case smooth muscle cells. And how do we get all of this unique, awesome stuff? Well, it goes back to that first slide I showed you about genes. So DNA makes RNA makes proteins. So different DNA turns on, and it allows cells to start looking different and only turning on or using the proteins they need to look different. So cells divide and grow, okay? And then they also differentiate. So they start to look different. Remember, structure dictates function. So the way something looks determines how it is going to behave and do its job. And that's what we're going to be talking about here. All right, so what are cells again? So now we're going to go from small to big. So let's talk about cells again. Basic structural and functional unit of life. Smallest part of an organism that's still capable of all life's processes. What does that mean? Basically, they're the smallest thing that has genes, can respond to stimuli, can grow and reproduce, etc. Cells are extremely diverse, okay, and that happens due to that differentiation I just mentioned. So you can have prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells, and eukaryotic cells have a lot of diversity, as you should remember from our diversity of life project. All right, even in humans, we have about 200 different types of specialized cells, right? So certain muscle cells are different than neuronal cells in your brain, which are different from some of the glial cells in your brain, which are different from epithelial cells. They're all different because they have different jobs to do to make you function. And if we zoom in into cells, cells are made of organelles. Organelles are little specialized structures within the cell that work together to help the cell function. An organelle literally means tiny organs. So these are the things that help your cell function, like Golgi apparatus or ribosomes, stuff like that, which you don't necessarily need to know for this course. And let's just quickly review. Remember, there's prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Prokaryotes, no nucleus, no membrane-bound organelles. They're unicellular, so these are your bacteria and archaea. Eukaryotes, like you and me, we have a nucleus. We have membrane-bound organelles, so that's going to be like a Golgi apparatus or an endoplasmic reticulum, okay? And we can either be multicellular or unicellular. Remember, all cells, all organisms on planet Earth, okay, have a cell membrane. That's the thing that surrounds a cell and makes its inside different from the world outside. They all have a cytoplasm, that's the fluid that's in there. They all have ribosomes, which is an organelle involved in reading RNA and making proteins. Remember, all life needs proteins because proteins are the doers of life. They're our little worker bees. And then all of them have genetic material because guess what? Something needs to store that information. I'm bringing this up again because we keep getting this question wrong. All life has cell membranes, cytoplasm, ribosomes, and genetic material. Eukaryotes add a lot of complexity to that, obviously, because I am way more complex. You are way more complex than a bacteria. All right, so multicellular life can then differentiate cells into tissues. All right, so these are cells that have a similar structure and work together to perform a common function. All right, so distinct structures are made up of at least two different types of tissues, and that is what we call an organ. So an organ is when a bunch of different tissues come together to make a structure that can perform a certain job, okay? So there's four types of tissues: epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle tissue, nervous tissue, and if you look here, a stomach, you can see that it's made up of a couple different tissue types. It's made up of loose connective tissue, nervous tissue, blood, which is a type of connective tissue, epithelial tissue, and smooth muscle tissue. So it takes a lot of different cell types to make something like a stomach. And that's how you get an organ. So what are all these different tissues? What are they used for? So epithelial tissue is used for covering body surfaces, and it protects your body. So this is going to be like the epidermis of your skin, all right? And it can also make up glands that need to excrete things or kind of take things in. All right, so exocrine is externally secreting, or endocrine is internally secreting. So like your endocrine system internally secretes hormones, whereas an exocrine gland, like a sweat gland, is externally secreting sweat. All right, connective tissue. These are supporting, protecting, insulating, transporting, and binding other tissues together. That's the really important part, that they help stick things together. All right, you have a couple different types. So fat is one of them, cartilage is one of them, bone is another type of connective tissue, and blood is kind of a weird one to think about, but it's actually connective tissue because it's helping transport substances throughout your body. Muscle tissue, this is one of my favorite tissue types. It is made of tightly packed cells that allow contractions to take place, and that causes movement. Okay, you have these different fibers that kind of run along one another, and they can expand and contract, and that's what allows you to move around. All right. Skeletal muscles attached to your bones, makes sense. Skeletal attached to bones. Smooth muscle, these are ones you can't control, and these help move things along. So this is like in your digestive system. And cardiac muscle, this is a very specialized type of muscle cell that is only in your heart, and it basically allows for the contraction of your heart to pump blood. All right, so there's your skeletal, here's your smooth, and there's your cardiac. And lastly, we come to the nervous tissue, which is our last tissue type. And this is basically what's going to allow control and regulation and communication across your entire body. So most of your body systems are going to be attached to some type of nervous tissue, and that's going to be running back to your brain, which is kind of the central processing unit of your body. All right, so that makes up the brain, spinal cord, nerves. And it's mainly made of neurons, which is a highly specialized type of cell that can generate and conduct nerve impulses. So that's basically transmitting signals from anywhere in your body to anywhere else in your body. So like if I pick up this pen right here, I know I'm holding this pen because a neuron is transmitting that signal of touching this pen to my brain, and my brain's like, hey, cool, I have a pen in my hand. All right. So what are tissues going to be made of? So we're zooming back in again. So this unit is all about being able to conceptually in your brain zoom in and zoom out to know what size thing we're talking about. So now we're kind of zooming in again to see what tissues are made up of. And obviously the majority of us is water, because water is really cool and most chemical processes can happen in water. The rest is going to be made up of macromolecules, so that's fats, proteins, carbohydrates, and DNA. So those are really important. We'll talk about what those look like in the next unit. And the rest are going to be ions or other small molecules. So ions are things with charges, so like hydrogen ions or calcium ions or potassium ions you get from eating a banana. All right. So let's talk about our systems. Our systems, so now we're getting bigger again. We went cells, we went tissues, we talked about organs, so now we're getting bigger again, and we're going to talk about organ systems here. So organisms are made up of organ systems, which are made of organs, which are made of tissues, which are made of cells. So you have to be able to zoom in and zoom out, go forwards and backwards in this unit. So what's the point of all these different systems? Well, they come together to maintain an equilibrium in your body from the system level all the way down to the cell level. And that's really what homeostasis is. It's this balance that keeps you alive. None of these things are working in isolation. All of your organ systems work together, which I'll explain here in a minute. And so that's what I'm going to explain right now. So the circulatory system, its main function is gas exchange and nutrient transport. So your blood is really trying to transport nutrients around your body that you get from eating. So when you eat something, your digestive system breaks it down. Once it's small enough, it can enter your blood, and your blood can move all of that stuff around to where it needs to go. Also, gas exchange is happening, so when you're moving around and using energy, your body's doing that cell respiration thing we talked about briefly, and that generates waste products like CO2. So that CO2 moves into your blood, and then it moves from your blood to your lungs, and you breathe it out. So some animals have way less complicated circulatory systems. So like a jellyfish doesn't really need a circulatory system because it has a simpler body plan, and it can just remove waste through simple diffusion. So that's where things move from a high concentration to a low concentration. So say there was CO2 building up in a jellyfish, it doesn't need to have that CO2 go to blood and then be breathed out through lungs. That CO2 is just going to kind of evaporate off of its body out into the water around it. Respiratory system, what's its purpose? Well, we just talked about it. It's gas exchange. So it takes oxygen in, that oxygen goes to your blood and your circulatory system, then it can move to your muscles where it's used for cellular respiration, and then those muscles generate carbon dioxide. It moves back to your blood, from your blood into your respiratory system, into your lungs, out of your lungs, and you get rid of that waste. So that's your lungs, nose, mouth, trachea, and diaphragm, which is the muscle right here that moves your lungs. Okay, in some animals, they have gills instead of lungs, and that's where they can basically do the same thing. They still need to take in oxygen and remove carbon dioxide, so that's like fish. Digestive system, what's its main purpose? Well, to break down food and absorb nutrients for the body. So your body needs to get those macromolecules we talked about to build all of this stuff. So it needs fats, it needs sugars, and it needs protein. And how does it get them? Well, you eat food, you break those down, then your body absorbs them in your blood, and your blood transports them to where they need to go. And some things have really crazy digestive systems. So, in a cow, they're a ruminant. Okay, so they take in a lot of food, and basically, they have a part in their stomach that kind of digests that for them. They have bacteria that can break down cellulose. So cellulose is something we can't digest, but cows have bacteria that help them. Termites eat wood also. They have a bacteria that helps them. So that's a different type of digestive system. Excretory system, well, this is getting all of that junk in your blood that is happening. So part of metabolism is like making proteins or making fats, and that can generate a lot of nitrogen in your blood, which turns into ammonia. Ammonia is a poison. It's not good. So your body can turn it into something known as urea. And guess what? Where does urea end up? Well, it ends up in your kidneys, ends up in your bladder, and you pee it out as urine. So your excretory system works with your circulatory system to filter your blood, and also your body can get rid of waste through sweating as well. So a non-human example is plants. Plants also need to get rid of their gaseous waste, and they do that through the stomata in their leaves, which are little holes in their leaves. Now we're on to the integumentary system. Integumentary system, what is that? It's basically an outer layer that protects your body from the outside world. This is going to be made of that epithelial tissue we talked about. And it's going to help regulate your temperature and control water loss, because we said 70% of us is water. We need to keep that water inside of us because chemical reactions take place really well in water. All right. So other things, well, here we go. You can have scales, you can have slime, hooves, feathers, fur, all of that stuff are different versions of an integumentary system. We come to the muscular system, which is its main function, movement and stabilization. But another function of the muscular system is actually to generate heat, because all those reactions we're talking about, that metabolism, that needs a certain temperature for it to take place. So about 2/3 of everything you eat actually just gets wasted generating heat to make sure you can build all of this stuff we're talking about, which is kind of incredible. All right. Muscles in a bat's larynx are some of the quickest muscles that exist. They can contract 200 times per second. So that's how they make those really high-pitched sounds to echolocate bugs and find them and eat them, which is pretty cool. Skeletal system, what's its main job? Well, to support all of that stuff, to protect everything that's inside of you. And so it aids in movement because now your muscles have something to attach to, a lever that they can move, and that allows us to move around. Also, your skeletal system is involved with your immune system and your circulatory system because blood cells are generated inside of your bone marrow. Some things have exoskeletons, unlike humans, and starfish have skeletons made of tubes and fluids rather than bones, which is kind of a weird thing. Nervous system, about 20% of everything you eat goes to just powering your brain, which is incredible because your nervous system is the processing center. This is going to control both voluntary movements, so me talking and stuff, and involuntary reflexes and everything else. So smooth muscle control, cardiac muscle control, all of that's happening from your brain. All right. And so your brain is your spinal cord, your nerves, and every sensory organ you have. So your ability to smell, see, taste, touch, hear, all of that gets processed by the brain. And really the key cells and tissues here are going to be nervous tissue and neurons. So in general, non-primate animals have less complex brains than we do, but some animals have really developed auditory systems, like a dolphin. Endocrine system, its main function, secretion of hormones that regulate stuff. So this is another control center. And a non-human example is like the thyroid in a frog, which controls how it develops. Reproductive system allows things to reproduce, make babies. All right. And marsupials have very weird reproductive systems. So they have a pouch, so their babies are born really, really small and live in that pouch until they grow up. And finally, we come to the immune system, which defends our body is incredibly complex in humans. So immune cells are made in your bone marrow. I talked about that earlier. Other animals not as complex, but they still do have immune systems. All right. So guys, that's it for today. Thanks a lot. Stay curious. Bye.